So culture, just seeing it and experiencing it as a player, the culture shift is incredibly important.
If you asked me, where'd you learn that? I would be able to tell you where I learned it from. And I could pinpoint it to the person, to the experience, to a Twitter article. There are plays that there are designers, because what you mentioned, those individual plays that I've watched Dan Casey and said, we're going to run the spinner series in the playoff game for a week.
Welcome to the Left Hash Call, or welcome back to the Left Hash Call. If you are a returning listener, very excited for this episode today. Got another loaded one for you. Another one loaded one as always. In the first hour, we have Alex Boyer coming on to chat about cultivating a culture within an offensive line room, and specifically what he does to really set expectations for that culture and also get guys all moving in the same direction. Excited for that conversation as well. We have Caleb Carrill returning on the show in the second hour to talk about becoming an OC. Obviously, we've talked to him before and some of the things that he's going through currently as an OC, but nothing's quite like that first year becoming an OC for the first time. It's the first time maybe it's time for you to manage a staff, build a staff. How are you going to treat the pass game coordinator, the run game coordinator? What schemes do you want to run? What's important to you? And also, as well, within that culture of an offensive unit, what are the things that you need to be thinking about if it's your first time as an offensive coordinator? Excited for that conversation. And again, I think that also applies if it's your first year being a defensive coordinator. And, obviously, you're never really ready to be a coordinator for the first time, no matter what level it is. Excited for both of those conversations. And as always, I really appreciate the support of the show. We continue to grow and reach new people, and I really appreciate the support of each and every one of you that listens, likes, all that good stuff, as well as the guests that we've continued to have on. So let's get into this one. I'm pumped to have both of these conversations. And now on the show, a guy who just coached a team that had its first winning season since 2018. My friend, the offensive line coach at Simpson College, recurring guest now, Alex Boyer. How are we doing today, brother?
Not too bad. Not too bad. It's a little cold outside, but we're making it through.
What's since the season's wrapped up here, and we'll get into that here in a little bit, what's been on your plate lately? Obviously, been out in recruiting, been on the road a little bit, but just kind of walk me through what's kind of been going on lately.
Yeah. Wrapped up the season a couple weeks ago. Wrapped it up with exit meetings. Going through each position group. Each guy in your position group, and having them summarize, how they thought the season went for themselves, and laying out the goals that they have for themselves heading into the off season, and into next season as well. And then after that, I absorbed the recruiting coordinator role within the staff. So been spending a lot of time, most of my time organizing official visit schedules, coordinating with, the people in admissions to, make sure everything runs as smoothly as possible. And then, trying to hit the road as much as possible and, hit those schools that are, priorities for us in general. And then, going and meeting with those kids that we see as a priority and, building our program up to where, we can take another step forward next year.
Obviously, you talk about absorbing the recruiting coordinator role. What has been maybe some of the most challenging parts of that, and also some of the things that maybe kind of feel like second nature to you, because obviously you've been such a big part in the recruiting piece already, but kind of talk about stepping into that role and what that's been like, kind of being now an organizer of such within the program.
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge for me is just getting the visit organized to where everything's running smoothly. Because we do visits in a very unique way compared to places that I've been in the past, where, it is very much an individualized experience for the guys that we bring on campus, and, they get a chance, or we give them the chance to, experience as much or as little as they want within the visit. So trying to find a way to make all those visits, flow and, match up the schedules to where, you know, we have coaches in the right spot at the right time and making sure we're not double booking things. Not only with some of the things that they will experience, within the visit, but like not, we don't want to double book coaches to where they have to be in two places at once or anything like that. And then coordinating with our admissions office, and they've been great. They've been patient with me and, trying to figure out this process myself. But coordinating with them, about, is this kid going to get a campus tour? Is he wanting me with admissions, financial aid, working through things like that. And then coordinating with our guys. Our guys are probably the biggest and best recruiters on our team. All right. Like you can sit here and say one of our staff members is an elite recruiter. We couldn't get the job done, as a recruiting staff without the guys on our team helping us out. We have guys who host lunch, sit one-on-one with the recruits that we have on campus. And we have guys who host overnights and they do a phenomenal job with it. And they've been, over the years that I've been here, they've been a huge asset in the success that we've had in recruiting. So, those are some of the challenges, is just kind of connecting all the dots. Because at the beginning of the week, when you get all the information, it's like, all right, how is this all going to mash up together? And then you get to, you know, Thursday night, or the night before a visit, and you're like, all right, here we go. I think I got it. And then there's always, because we have a pre-visit meeting, on the mornings of visits. And there's always like one or two tweaks that we need to make. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less, to kind of finalize everything. I think naturally, things that come naturally within that position is just, working with everybody and just trying to coordinate and make it, to where it all fits. More on the people side of things, working with, the coaches on our staff and trying to pair them up with, what they do really well. Like Coach Roberts, is phenomenal. I experienced it myself yesterday or the day before. Is very good with the photo shoot side of things, like getting the guys, juiced up about it.
That's not always an easy role. You get in there, the kid sometimes is like, flexes whatever, but doesn't really know what to do. But having a coach that can go in there and facilitate the energy it's an unsung role for sure.
Yeah, no doubt, and especially because every recruit is going to be different when it comes to photo shoots. There's some kids that you're going to have to like beg to leave and move on to like the next thing that they want to do because they've got all these ideas, and there's other kids where you kind of have to pull it out of them a little bit. As far as the photo shoots though, Coach Carluck and Coach Spangler, our two interns, do a phenomenal job of just kind of fitting in where they get in. And a lot of that is just being the transition piece, between like lunches and position meetings and stuff like that. So kind of finding the strengths within our staff and really trying to blend it up the best that I can, that way.
Right.
So.
You talk about going on the road now a little bit. I think one of the things that's hard with being on the road is, each school that you go to, they might have a couple of guys that are maybe even thinking about playing football. You might have a couple guys that are a good fit for Simpson, and then you might have a couple guys that maybe, are at the Division I level or a higher level per se. But I think the most important piece, and I think you would agree with this, is meeting with those coaches, and so that you are top of mind when they do get a kid that's a good fit. Talk about going on the road a little bit this cycle so far since wrapping up and meeting with some of the players, some of the coaches around, your area.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a unique experience now, more so from the fact that I've been recruiting this area for almost 3 entire years, and a lot of those coaches, in my region, stick around. So coming back for, a sixth or seventh time now, I just never mind, 6, 7.
Dude,
you can cut that
leave
out.
it in.
No, please. But rolling through, as many times as I have, it's nice because you develop almost friendship's a little bit of a weird term to use, but like a nice working relationship where you feel like these guys a lot better than you did the first time coming through. And it's not always like that with all the coaches, but sometimes you can sit in there and There, for example, one of the schools that I stopped at, um, we sat there and chopped it up, that me and the coach for, 15, 20 minutes about a bunch of random things. He was asking me about run game. I was asking how the season went. We just kind of were going back and forth. And at the end of the day, he's like, Coach, I should have emailed you this, but all of our guys, decided that either football's not for them or they're going in a different direction. I was like, that's part of the business, right? You're going to hear, especially in recruiting, you're going to hear no way more than you say or hear yes, right? And if you hear yes more, then um, you know, you're one of the best in the business, I guess. But it's been awesome. I mean, I really enjoy the coaches that I work with in the recruiting process. Getting to know kids, each recruiting cycle, there's gonna be a select few that you get, pretty tight with in the recruiting process, and that's always the joy, is getting to know these guys, because at the end of the day, they may come to your school, they may not, but you get to know somebody, through the process, and it's important for those guys. And I lay it out for them pretty early in the recruiting cycle. Is like, you guys got to make the decision that you think is best for you. Like, don't come in here, or I'm not going to come in here and like tell you Simpson's the only place you should be looking at. Like, go through the experience, like go find what fits. Because it's a 4-year commitment, or at least it should be a 4-year commitment, that you're going to have to really invest into yourself. And the other thing I leave them with is college football's difficult. Like, there's a lot that's asked of you, between school, weightlifting during the football season, meetings before practice, the expectations that you're studying film on your own as well. Like, it's a big time commitment, irregardless of the level that you're at. So, during that process, I want to make sure that those guys understand, those two big things, is like, make sure that this is about you. You're not doing this to make, mom and dad happy, or your buddies happy, or you shouldn't be doing it for the social media stuff. And then ultimately you got to understand, the time commitment that goes into it, and that this, again, irregardless of the level, it's good football. And there's gonna be a lot that's asked of you that may not have been asked of you before when you were in high school, or various levels before that.
Right, because if you you guys set those expectations really early in the process, because if you're just talking to a kid and you tell them how great it is, and how all the I guess the sunshine and rainbows aspect to it. I mean, they might get on campus, realize, oh, this is actually really hard, and just end up going home. And so that's always, I think that's a good thing to do as well, is tell kids, hey, like, go visit a million different schools, because like, you got to make sure this is the right fit for you. Because if you don't, you just, I guess, go to the one spot that's talking to you right now. It might not be a good fit down the road. But I want to talk about this season a little bit. Obviously, we talked about it right in the open. There is the best season Simpson has had since 2018. I guess from your perspective, going back through it, what are some of the things that you learn from previous years to implement into this year, and just what are some of the things that have really improved since, obviously, you've been here pretty much the entire time?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the major things that I've learned from the previous seasons here and heading into this one, is like the teaching part is like hugely, hugely, hugely important. When I started to develop a more of a teaching style in the spring, and getting these guys to understand the fullness of the scheme and where they're going to fit into it. Um, and it started with, I when we installed a new play in the spring, I wanted them to know the bare minimum. Like, what is the least amount you can know, about tight zone before stepping out onto the field, right? And then after that, like, once we had that base knowledge, it's like, all right, we're going to teach the rest of the scheme as those various scenarios come to us. And in the nature of our defense, I mean, we're going to get thrown everything. So we're going to see a lot of different scenarios, and we're going to teach those scenarios as they come to us, right? So they can develop that knowledge, um, not all at once, but like in bits and pieces. So the teaching style definitely changed. And just, for me, doing a better job of having like a true grip on what the defense is trying to accomplish when they're out there on the field on Saturdays, and then how are we going to counteract that? and then teaching that scheme really in a new way each week, because tight zone, against Wartburg is going to break out a little bit differently than tight zone against Loris, right? So teaching that scheme and this is what we're trying to attack within it. So the guys understand the why. Like, all right, here's what we see out of their defense. Here are the scenarios that we might see with this play out of this formation. And it's like, all right, guys, I mean, if we get this situation right here, this is not like, it's going to be tough, right? But we have to be ready for it, right? So really trying to spend more time developing as a teacher, and getting the guys to understand the scheme, is something that I feel like I developed a lot more, and it ultimately led to some more success within our room. By no means were we perfect. Um,
I think just expanding on that a little bit. Obviously, you have the success, right, that comes with it, with implementing, and building on these things. Because obviously, like, you just had an all conference left tackle, and that dude's played for you for however many years now, and the things that you were trying to get across to him in year one are a lot different than what you're trying to do in year three. So I guess over the course of these 3 seasons to now have, I guess things come together, like, as obviously you want to win more games, you want to, win conference championships, national championships, compete for all those good things. But to see that progress, has got to feel good, and it's got to, I guess, confirm what you already knew, that we're doing the right things.
yeah, yeah, no doubt. And I said this, we had a banquet, about this time last week. And that the senior group that we, said our farewells to at the end of that banquet, um, you know, Mason being included in that, our all conference tackle. I mean, that group was the core of this offensive line from the very beginning. Like, we had, Joe was a phenomenal center for us, who graduated the year before these guys did. But this group of guys made up a bulk of the room that we had from the very beginning until now. And, um, those guys adapting to me and understanding the expectations that we were going to lay out, not only as like their position coach, but like the expectations that Coach Hoskins was going to lay out for the entire football team. And those guys, credit to them, like they took it and ran with it, because they had to adjust to 3 different position coaches before they even got to their sophomore season. So there was a lot of changing pieces and trying to build chemistry with a new coach, multiple times before, their second go around, in their careers. And I mean, I can't speak highly of that group enough. I mean, it's similar to, because I was thinking about it earlier, knowing that we were going to be doing this show, is, I think, Coach Walker at River Falls had talked about some of those groups that came before this era of time where they're seeing all the success, and like, he wanted to make sure that those groups that came before understood that they got to this point because of those groups that came early on. And certainly I didn't do a great job during the banquet about, I was trying to reel in some of my emotion with this group, but I mean, certainly the success that this group in the future for this offensive line sees and this team sees will be done off of the work of this senior group's, work ethic and the work that they put into taking this team to where it is now. So I mean, a lot of credit to those guys. I mean, those guys I'll do anything for. The adversity that each of those guys went through, and a lot of them, like, it would have been easy for them to just say, "Hey, I'm done. Like, I don't need this anymore. I don't want to be a part of it." But they kept fighting. They kept wanting to be a part of it. They kept wanting to make this place great. And I mean, I couldn't be more thankful for that group that came through, in this 25 class. So
It takes a very resilient individual, takes a really resilient group of individuals to come together as a team to turn something around like this. Because if you're unfamiliar with the history of Simpson as far as football is concerned, historically very successful program. But I was a part of a 1-9 season, and then another 1-9 season after me, and then obviously the staff turns over. Obviously, Coach Hoskins gets hired, with along with the rest of you guys, and then turn that thing, starting to head towards the right direction at 3-7, and then last year 5-5, and then this most previous season go 6-4, and start to really be competitive. Pretty, I mean, in most of the games that you're playing in, and I think it's a testament to what you guys have done, on staff, and I obviously saw it firsthand, and really just continue to be proud of what you guys continue to do over there. But that kind of leads into, I guess, our main topic of the day, and that's really, and you kind of spoke to it a little bit as far as hinting at it, but cultivating culture in the offensive line room. I think it's the biggest group on the entire team, right? And within that as well, it's the only group where all five guys, and at times six when you get a tight end in there as well, all playing together. And I think as much as there is the on the field stuff, as much as there is mental, physical, it's the culture that I think is such a big part of it, and that's kind of obviously the reason why we're talking about this today. But I guess to start out, as far as like an opening statement in talking about this topic here, what are some of the things that you want to get into today, and kind of just preview some of these things going forward?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've always been incredibly big on culture. Culture is going to take you a lot farther than scheme will. And I learned that, through my college time, at Midland, where kind of a similar situation where, I mean, we came off of a 1-10 season my freshman year and then turned it around. So culture, just seeing it and experiencing it as a player, the culture shifts is incredibly important. Um, and to build that within an offensive line room, I mean, that's one of the most critical things that you can do as a coach. Because, I mean, you said it. I mean, the offensive line room to me is a team within a team, right? I mean, you got 5 different positions, on the field at one time, and they're all their techniques, their assignments, what they've got to get done, based on, run game, pass protection. It's all going to look a little bit different. But at the end of the day, they got to work together, be 5 as 1. That's something that I say a lot in the recruiting process to, the guys that we're recruiting. Um, but I mean, the biggest thing to start with culture is like the level of trust that you've got to build, inside and around the offensive line. And, that takes on a lot of different things, like trust in player to player, right? Like I played center. I mean, I had to trust that, the guards that played next to me understood what they were needing to get done. And if they didn't, then I had to help them out. So like that player to player trust is critical. Coach to player trust is critical as well, where I got to trust that the guys on the field, the guys in the room are doing everything they can to be ready on Saturdays. Just like they've got to trust in me that I'm going to do everything that I can to get them ready. So, I mean, the trust part's critical, and that's something that takes time. Um, like for, year one, like I pretty much joined the team in August. Like those guys didn't know who I was until the first install meeting with the offensive line. So I mean, no fault to anyone. It's hard to trust somebody that you're meeting for the first time. But that trust gets built over time, just as like the trust between you and your teammates gets built over time. The more reps that you get with them, and that chemistry starts to come through and really start to show its face, on the football field.
I think, moving into this next piece here, I think you got to be really intentional about how you shape that culture and not assume that guys know how to do things, because what they did as a 16 or 17-year-old might not necessarily be what they understand as an 18 to 22-year-old, and the people that, and the young men that you work with as a coach. But I guess setting those expectations, what are some of the main things that you think about and you are intentional about when talking to your guys as far as implementing that culture and how you do things?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the expectation, like we're gonna do things the way that we're supposed to on and off the field. Like that's the number one overall expectation. Like off the field, like we're attending class, we're putting work in the classroom, studying to, maintain our GPA or improve our GPA. And on the field, we are dedicated to mastering our craft. And obviously that's not going to happen day one, day two. The mastery may not ever show its face until, towards the end of your career. But you're constantly dedicated to putting the work in on the practice field, to improving, and being the best that you can be when your team needs it. That's something that Coach Hoskins brings up a lot, is that competitive greatness of, just being at your best when your best is needed. And those are some expectations that we don't just sit there in the first meeting of the year and I lay out all these expectations, that those expectations show by how we do things, ultimately doing my best to lead by example for the room, and, developing those leaders to lay out those expectations and live by those expectations as well. That's another part that's really critical, is developing those leaders. And, when those leaders get picked, right, because we hold a little bit of a vote for our leadership council, and for our captains. Like, if there are guys in our room that get identified as leaders by the football team, it's like, all right, we're going to give you the responsibility that you have in that room is going to look a little bit different. But ultimately, like, I got to provide a voice for them to develop as leaders. And it may not be directly like, hey, Jimmy, you've got to say this to the guys. It's like, all right, man, we're in this situation. Like, who are you going to be? What are you going to say to that group to, keep them level and keep them competing at a high level?
One of the things I think that I love about how you went about your business is creating an identity within the offensive line room, and creating that expectation. Not only whether it's I know some groups like to, and I'm not talking about like giving yourself a name or whatever the case is, but a physical identity and what it sounds like when they talk to each other. Talk about that. Talk about, what it sounds like, what it looks like when you're not in the room, when Coach Hoskins isn't in the room, when the coordinators aren't in the room. Talk about, setting that expectation as far as identity goes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the identities and it come from the expectations that get laid out, and the culture in the room. And it's an understanding of, this is who we want to be, and ultimately this is who we are. And, I said it on a previous show, it's not always like culture and that expectation, that identity is not always what you see, on the football field and at practice. A lot of times it's what you hear. And, I think our room, like, embraced things like that. We had some, incredible leadership, within our room. And, on Saturdays between drives, like, I intentionally would stay away from the guys, give them like a minute or two to kind of get down, decompress, and get ready. And I'd often hear the chatter. It's like, all right, like, hey, next drive, next drive, next drive, irregardless of, what happened on that previous drive. We could have gone down on a 10-play touchdown drive, um, just dialed them up all the way down. But like the constant messaging was next drive, next play. And that's the mentality that we got to have. And then ultimately, I think the other thing that I really enjoyed hearing is, if I was coaching up, somebody specifically, on the tablet or on a technique, between drives, I wouldn't be fully listening because I'm speaking as well, but there'd be other guys, talking about like what happened on a certain play in that drive, and like, oh no, we just got to be a little bit more square, or we got to be a little bit more patient on the combo as it's going up to the back, or no, I gotta identify that pre-snap so we're all on the same page as far as pressures go. So that expectation, and camaraderie that's built, really shows its face on Saturdays. And ultimately, I think it helps the guys work together. And just hearing that communication that happens on the sideline, that doesn't always come from me. It comes from the guys in the room and understanding where their fit is. And ultimately, the two guys that we had, identified as captains, taking charge of that group on the sidelines. And we did a good job. I mean, we always stayed right in the middle. Like, we never really allowed, there'd be moments where we would get high if something great happened. Um, uh, but we would always, hey, find your baseline. Like, it would be snap back to your baseline. We got to get focused, and get ready for any corrections that, come our way, heading into the next drive, and things like that. And also just hearing what those guys like, hey, coach, we really like tight zone right now. We got a good grip on it. Um, we feel like we're pretty solid in the combos, or hey, coach, we've been running a lot of tight zone. I think they're starting to eat it up. Maybe we should move to, some pin and pull counter, different things like that. And just hearing the back and forth, like, all right, coach, like this is what we see, like, what do you see kind of thing. And continuing to build off of that as game plans evolve, because those things evolve during the game. They evolve between drives, right? And ultimately they evolve as the situation changes, as you get later into the game as well. So, um, those expectations, man, we're dialed in, and we're going to keep it at a level where, we're playing irregardless of what's happening on the field and irregardless of what happened previously, and just doing what we can to get focused for that next drive, ultimately to help the offense move the ball, help the team, in any way that we can.
It's also very important, I think, to when guys give you feedback on the sidelines, depending on the drive, I think it's important to talk to or understand that, or respond to those guys in the correct way as well, because I think it'd be very easy to, maybe sometimes disregard what guys are saying, and also kind of getting yourself right, depending on what the drive have, getting yourself back to baseline as well, so that you can take in that feedback, regardless of if it's, maybe it's good feedback, maybe it's not, maybe it's something you already know, but allowing those guys to share their thoughts, so that when there is another situation, they say, hey, what'd you see there? They're not timid about coming back to that, or coming back to you and saying, hey, coach, we really like this. So that feedback is so important to reassure them, like, hey, that's good, we'll take a look at it, versus, you might see some other situations where, like, no, that's not there, or whatever. Like, your voice matters just as much when trying to get them to continue to say those things that help you win games on Saturdays.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, a lot of that also boils back down to like the trust part, like those guys trusting that they can come to me during the game and be like, hey, coach, I'm struggling with this, or hey, on this play, like, can we try to pull it up if we've got time? Or just trusting that, like, I'm going to be receptive to what they're going to say, right? That kind of goes back to that coach to player, player to coach trust that we're trying to build, every season and continue to maintain. But yeah, no doubt. I mean, that stuff's important. And, there's some times that as a coach that you need to stay level with them. Sometimes you got to light a little bit of a fire. I mean, there were times during the season where I was like, we need a little bit of a spark. And sometimes that message gets, relayed a little bit differently, depending on the situation. But I mean, that's something that you got to be cognizant of as a coach, is like knowing, how is that message going to get presented, especially in a game. Like, all right, we're a little sluggish right now. We're making some boneheaded mistakes, right? Like, we need to, I need to light a little bit of a fire and get these guys, to get that energy up, right? Or B, like get focused. Like, I mean, there's gonna be times where we lose that focus, and again, sometimes that's a little bit dependent on the scoreboard, right? If that scoreboard looks good to us, there's a tendency to relax a little bit, and you got to guard against that. On a drive by drive series, and even game by game, like, it's easy to feel good after a win, or it's easy to feel good in a game when you're just laying it on somebody. Um, but again, it goes back to that, like, we're going to play regardless of what the scoreboard says. And, um, we're going to keep swinging, no matter what. We're up by 100, we're down by 100. Like, we're going to go out there and put the best product on the field possible. Um, so there's times that focus needs to be, dialed in a little bit more, or, you got to pick the energy up, because, like, and I don't want to, keep throwing out Sabanisms, but it's like really easy to be average, right? Like, that's just what we want to be, right? And
Human
sometimes it's
nature,
easy.
right? Human nature wants to be average.
Right, right. And, like, oh, we're up by 40 points and it's the third quarter. Like, all right, well, we can just kind of hang out now. It's like, that's not how we're going to do things. Like, we got to play, regardless of, our opponent. irregardless of the scoreboard, irregardless of if it's sunny and 75 or it's, the wind's blowing, it's 20 degrees outside and it's sleeting in your face. Like we've got to be the same group out there no matter what, because that's what the team needs, right? And ultimately it develops that muscle of like we're gonna be the same no matter what, irregardless of those conditions that are laid out for us.
Being that you have the biggest group within the team, especially once you add in, the tight ends as well, because those guys are as much a part of that group as anybody else. It's natural that you might have a guy or two, especially maybe in the I think in any position group or any team, have a guy that maybe isn't necessarily buying in or isn't matching the energy of the group. And not to speak to any direct situations, but what's kind of your process in handling that? Are you kind of a let the guys kind of take care of that, or you know are you one that'll bring him aside and say, hey, obviously maybe it's a guy that's not playing very well, or maybe not in the role that he's in, but you still got to have that guy bring the juice and bring the energy and be a part of that, because there's two types of people. There's energy givers and energy takers. And um, how do you go about having some of those tough conversations and getting those guys to kind of buy into that, maybe when they aren't at times?
Yeah. I mean, I think each situation is a little bit different. Um, ultimately, I would prefer to let our leaders lead, and see how they handle the situation first. Um, though, the guys that we've had in the past have had no problem, making an attempt at the very least at addressing those things, right? Um, and then ultimately, if I don't feel like the change has happened, with that particular person, then that's more of like I try to keep that stuff one on one. I don't think it helps really anybody, especially the guy in question, if they're getting pointed out in front of the rest of the group. And sometimes you gotta understand that individual before you can address them in any kind of way, right? Goes back to just having that relationship, that trust, and again, we've talked about trust a lot, um, but really understanding who that guy is, and trying to find the best way to motivate them and get them in the right mindset. Um, if I'm going to address it as a coach, I prefer that stuff to be handled in a one-on-one setting. Whether it's after practice and nobody's around, or I text them during the day and say, hey, swing by my office, whenever you get a chance, and we'll talk one on one and just lay out what I see, um, not only as like what I'm seeing in that moment, but also like what I see in that guy and what they're capable of, right? Because it's easy to sit there and just rag on a guy for 15 minutes and be like, oh, you're not doing this or this. Um, I think it's also important for them to understand that you also see, potential in them and what kind of player they could be. Because I think that helps motivate them and not just think, oh, coach hates me. You know what I mean? Coach doesn't think I'm any good. It's like, it's getting them to understand, like, dude, I think the world of you. Like, I think you're much better than what you've shown. Um, and laying out, two or three things that you really do see in them. Um, so they understand, like, oh, coach sees something in me. Like I gotta, I gotta fix what I'm doing. Right. So
One of I know you're a Saban guy, and I'm a big Saban guy as well. And um, I don't know if this is directly from him, but I think it's hard at times being in the coaching profession, because coaching is so much so um, a process oriented profession, but on the outside, it's such a results oriented, I guess, game, I guess we would call it. And sometimes people really make it about winning and losing on the outside, but it truly is a process oriented deal. What's kind of your thought process behind that, and some of your takeaways from, as far as, not making it necessarily about winning and losing, but continue to, push forward the process and doing things the right way, regardless of what the scoreboard says, or what happens eventually on Saturdays?
yeah. I mean, a lot of that stuff, is is leading by example. I've used that phrase a number of times. Um, at like starting on the practice field during fall camp when we're in competitive periods, it's if, there's going to be some days that the offense has their day. There's going to be other days where the defense is playing really well. And, ultimately, if the offense doesn't have juice, or we're not playing to the level that we should, and there's not that back and forth that you would like to see, during practice, it's just remaining consistent in who you are on the practice field. And sometimes, like I said before, you got to light a fire. Sometimes you just got to coach these guys through it. And then getting into the meeting room and just like, guys, like right now, it is not about us winning more reps on the defense did or vice versa. Like, we got to understand that what we're trying to do right now is to develop, right, and get ourselves to a point where we're winning on a consistent level, you know, between reps, on Saturdays and like at the end when the scoreboard, when that scoreboard says zeros, that we're ultimately on top. Um, but it's also like guarding against like when things are going really well and like everybody's just kind of taking it easy because we're on a stretch of either we had a really good day at practice, um, or we're on like a 3-game win streak, right? Is like continuing to like crank that pressure up a little bit on the guys and guarding against that relief syndrome that's used in the profession is like, guys, like, great, we won, but there's so much stuff that we need to learn from and correct to continue this level of winning. And it's like you almost gotta fight against that relief, and like you don't want the guys to get too loose to where they're not fully dialed in. So, I mean, on a game by game basis, when we come in on Sundays, I almost coach the guys harder after wins than I did after losses. And it's like, guys, we gotta like, great, we beat so and so. Like that's not the only thing that we were trying to accomplish this season. We didn't go in and say, hey, we wanted to beat, Dubuque. Like that wasn't like obviously we want to beat everybody that we play, right? But that wasn't the end goal. And I don't think we played our best football, right? So here are the things, here are some of the points that we need to address because guess what? The next week's going to come to us. The team that's game planning for us this next week, I mean, they're going to see all the things that we're struggling at, right? And so we've got to get better here and understand like this is a technique that we've got to use and stay consistent on. But on the inverse of that, you lose a tight game. Our first game of the season was, if you take yourself out of it and just watch as a fan, I'm sure one of the best games that you could have seen, uh, at the Division III level all season. But you get into it and it's an emotional game. You start, behind, you climb your way back in, take the lead for a little bit, get into overtime, and then go for two and lose on the 2-point conversion. There's a lot of emotion there, and so the guys come in on Sunday and they're feeling themselves a little bit, like they're licking their wounds and stuff. So it's dialing it back and taking more of like that teacher role, and not letting the guys off easy by any means, but like the tone, and the direction that you're giving, definitely changes a little bit just so you don't lose them completely by just like berating them because there's not a single guy on that team, irregardless of if they played or not, that wants to lose those games, right? So like sitting there and ripping into them, like you're going to lose those guys at some point. So, and it just kind of goes back to like, keep it consistent, right? And there's a window that you need to coach within. And sometimes you've got to find that window, you know, as you're walking into the room to start the meeting, like what's the vibe in the room and addressing it where you're either bringing more energy, more fire, dialing it back a little bit. Again, it's kind of like that happy dance that you gotta dance to get into the right spot and get the most out of the meeting as possible.
To put a bow on this thing here, regardless of how this season went for anybody, there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to lead their own rooms for the first time because of hires, fires, whatever the case is. And so I guess your advice for a guy that's trying to figure out his culture or trying to figure out what his expectations should really be for his room, regardless if it's O-line room, quarterback room, receivers room, it doesn't matter what it is, or an entire offense, an entire defense. What do you think are some of the most important things to consider when first getting into this thing and kind of setting the standard for what you want your culture to be as a position group?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you don't want to stray too far away from the overall standard and expectation of the program, right? So, I mean, the head coach, between him and the leadership council, if you guys got one on the team, like they're going to set all that stuff, right? There's going to be a culture that's laid out. And I think it's really important to not stray too far away from what's been laid out. And so kind of adapting yourself to that and then making it your own. Like don't try to be anything that you're not. Like I read a lot of stuff on Saban, for example, or I listen to his speaks. I'm not trying to go out there and be Nick Saban, right? Like I've got to be me at the end of the day, and I've got to do what works for me, right? So that part's really important, is finding that blend or blending yourself into that culture and making a variation of your own, right? Um, I think the second part to that would be like be as consistent as possible with your teaching, and how you're going to go about things on the day to day, because we're all creatures of habit at the end of the day. And if you're constantly shifting who you are and what you're trying to do on a day to day basis, that's going to create like an unlevel foundation for those guys to work off of. And then lastly, like don't ever step away from, your own personal standards, or, what you want to get done and who you want to develop in the room. Like you've got to remain true and disciplined to, the things that are important to you, at the end of the day. So, those are really the things that are important to me. I mean, culture is something that everybody's chasing. It changes from year to year, just as teams do. But you've got to remain the common denominator in it, and stay true to yourself, and ultimately at the end of the day, be you.
You want to talk about the foundation at all? You want to shout that out at all?
Yeah, I
I'll tee
mean,
that up if you want to.
we talked about it, a little bit on the previous show, the Michelle Ashoff Boyer Foundation. We raised, from I want to say about February of this year, February of 25 to now, we've raised a little over $2,000. I think I've figured out. I don't want to make any announcements yet on where that's going. But ultimately, like I want to raise money for, kids, children who have been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and help them acquire resources to become educated on maintaining their bodies, because it's a tough disease. It really is. But no, I have an idea of where that money's going to go. Got a couple events that I'm working on, and that stuff will get announced, and I'll share that stuff on social media as much as I can. And then like the website's kind of a work in progress. I shared that with you last night. So still very much in the building phases of it, but no, I'm really excited, about, what we're doing, in terms of, the vision and, what we're trying to accomplish and helping, kids with type 1 diabetes. Um, and ultimately I'm very grateful for the people who have supported to, um, help my mom's legacy live on. So, I'm trying to
Yeah.
keep from getting a little emotional there, but no, it certainly means a lot.
Yeah. Follow Coach Boyer there at OL Coach Boyer on X, the Everything app. For all updates on that stuff, how you can support, how you can get involved if you so choose, or maybe potentially attend one of those future events. But appreciate you, brother. Appreciate everything you're all about. You're a first-class human and first-class friend, and appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, appreciate you having me back on, man. It's been fun.
One of the main guests that we've had on to talk about all of his thoughts as being an offensive coordinator and being a well-respected one at that, and that is the Georgetown offensive coordinator, Coach Caleb Carrill. How are we doing today, brother?
It's great, man. We're expecting some for where you're at. It wouldn't be much snow, but we're expecting about 3 to 5 inches down here. So everybody's bunkering now. They're barricading, and it's funny when this happens. We're not in the South, but down here they freak out. So we're loading up.
Well, that being being at St. Thomas, obviously being from Ohio, it. 3 to 4 inches is it's
Go to school.
right. We're going to
no change.
yeah, I think we've already gotten 3 to 4 inches already today, and yeah, we're gonna go get some go downtown, get something to eat. We'll probably go visit some of the sites. So that's nothing at this point. But anyways, how's the week been?
It's good. Had a productive. I know the show came out on Monday. We had a productive week in here, the program recruiting wise, and then got back to it. Was on the road early in the week, and then spent the rest of the week kind of doing the orchestrating the next wave of visits, but really spending some time internally on offensive system review, reflection, and then just revamping of some things. So we've been able to put some good work in that. If we do get a snow day of such, I get excited because I can just watch film. There's not, you know what I mean? Like, hey, you can just sit in your home office and turn on film. I'm getting ready to spin North Texas. That's kind of my first.
Those guys up tempo? They doing up tempo stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I know they ended up having the number one offense in the country, correct?
They moved the football. I know that.
Yeah, right. I believe the quarterback is the Burlsworth Award winner. So started his career as a walk-on.
Yes.
So yeah, unbelievable year for those guys. I know. What's the OC's name? Quarterback's coach. I can't remember his name. Brady? Coach Brady, maybe? I can't remember.
I probably should know. I just know they score. Let's see. The OC, Jordan Davis.
Okay, maybe it's the QB's coach that I'm thinking of. But anyway,
yeah,
so
Brophy,
on today's
Sean Brophy? Is that your guy?
Sean Brophy. Yeah, Sean Brophy. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, he does pass games. So yep, you're right.
Yeah, that makes some sense. But some of the things you'll look at the most, obviously, within that study. What's kind of when you go into a study? What are some of the things you're looking at?
Usually, I think when you have a defined system, which I think is obviously where we fall under, what I'm looking for is, are there any like hardwired concepts that like keep showing up that we either aren't utilizing, haven't utilized in a while, or seem to have a higher trajectory increase in what they're doing. I like seeing the way that teams, once you I watch it in subsequent order. So start at the beginning of the year, it's their base deal, and then see where they translate it to. I like to see how teams utilize formation distortion. And then like, how are they balancing their attack? So I always like to see, like, I'm sure every game just based on game plan, but like, how much is quick game utilized? How much RPO are they doing? What's their vertical shot mentality? What are they doing on third downs and red zone? So trying to gauge what a high level offense, how they're balancing out their operation. I do think there's always you're always going to get something schematically, certainly from a good offense. But looking for, just trends and traits that we might be able to bleed into what we're doing, or, incorporate in some capacity.
Well, it's always interesting that there's always trends, right? And there's always, like, when Tennessee had a big year a couple of years ago, you saw a lot of the deep choice stuff start to make its way through. And then you see teams like Wartburg, even at the small school level, like you see teams like Wartburg playing that crush front, and then you start to see it everywhere. Like, obviously, like Mark Sipple does it at Augie really well. Jace Rindle does it really well at Whitewater. Just stuff like, and then you have like the Eau Claire crush. That's, those guys do a great job of that as well. So it's interesting to see trends, but I think more so, you see, I like looking at systems more versus just trends, because like you can, there's certainly been a trend to start getting back to run the football, kind of like
Yeah.
what you've seen that definitely. But I think comparing, I guess scheme and what they do, I love looking at just versus plays. Like you see, like Dan Casey, love what he's
Yeah.
like the gold standard for that. But my favorite thing to do is looking at drives. I love looking at drives and seeing, okay, what do they start on first down with? Okay, then as soon as first down happens, then you're reactionary on second down, or maybe, obviously maybe it's an explosive play. But I think that's one of the things I love is, okay, what do the systems look like, and then what do the drives look like for me? Because that's how you probably think of as you don't think of plays. You probably think of what's the next thing I got to do. And
I was at a high school in Cincinnati, big time high school, really good football. Their head coach is a former small college coordinator, kind of similar pathways. I mean, really good coach, but he was talking about how guys at halftime would suggest plays, and he's like, that is an awesome play. And then I kind of cut him off and said, like, well, tell me what's off of it. Like, what are we doing with it? And I think that's, I was a play guy when I first started. I was all plays and this play for this coverage and this play for that coverage. And what I realized, and I go back to it every offseason, Lincoln Riley did a clinic when he's still at Oklahoma. It's like 80% of your open down calls have got to be able to answer everything.
Yeah.
And when you don't have a systematic approach of where, I think I saw, Dub Max stuff kind of getting pumped out today, but you don't have you have your base play and then you have constraints. And that's the way I think of it is, okay, let's put our base play on here and let's understand. The first thing I want to know is, okay, Coach Howard comes to me and says, here's a play. The first thing I'm going to ask is, all right, what stops it? Like, what takes it away? And then going to follow up with, okay, what's the answer to it? Is it a subsequent play? Is it a new action off of it? Is there, a tag that is applied to the next call knowing it's this coverage, or is the answer within it? And then I think you start the dialogue of understanding, because I think plays are good, concepts are better, right? And I think in conceptual approach, and like you're saying, drives is, I obviously watched tape and when I think it was Dan Casey put out like just watching NFL drives, watching coordinators call drives. Brainstorm on the fly, like that might be something fun where it's like, let's just watch.
Oh yeah, I love that. That's great. That's a good, just going forward. Just,
like what's happening, like why is, because you're right. I mean, it's systems. It's the systems is where you learn everything. And then I think you have to be, I think especially if you're a coordinator, which we're going to kind of talk about guys, developing their system, because it takes time to truly develop a system. I think what you have to be looking for is, how are the best systems organized? And I think that's what I've learned is I love clinicking, and I'll clinic. I won't ever, I won't clinic plays. Like if it's a singular play, I might show it as a 5-minute segment of a clinic, but I'm going to clinic a concept. But I think what's even more impactful, if I was putting myself in 25-year-old me, is how is a system built? How can you integrate a system's ideas into what you're building and starting from the framework and building out? And I think there's so much, that's where you become, a true, offensive coordinator and offensive, designer, and you're creating the plays inside out. But I think we'll talk about it and what we're going to talk about today, but understanding your core, I call them core value, your core value concepts so well that when defense does, adjustment A to you, it's expected. It's not, oh my gosh, they did that. Well, yeah, if you have a good play, they're going to take it away, and you have to understand how that's going to happen and then what the subsequent response is. And that's why the wing tee is so great. I mean, my dad was a wing tee coach, and I used to rebel against it because it's it's the cool thing to do, to rebel against wing tee. But
it's better to lean into it, man.
I mean, the if then, like when I look back at it now that I actually have to call plays for a living, I look at those guys and like, those guys understood if then this so well. And the adjustments were built into the system. When we go to halftime, these guys would rattle off the adjustments. I'm like, these guys are like wicked genius because they are thinking of these adjustments on the fly when really they are genius. But what's their genius is they understand the core concept. They understand what teams will do, but the answers are within the scheme. Like it's
Yeah.
built into it. Like it's trap, it's buck sweep, it's waggle, it's throwback, and it's a 4-play series. And so,
Well, you look
yeah,
at a team like Harding, right?
oh,
It's still playing. I mean,
yeah,
it's like
stupid.
the foot placement and doing that thing really well versus, and those are all concepts. And like you think about plays, a singular call on your play sheet is a set formation with a set either motion or no motion, set route, all that stuff. But a concept you can run out of. You can run out of
Never stops.
tight. You can run it
Yep.
out of wide splits. You can run it. It all gets there the same way. We when I had
Agree.
Drew Hollingshed on,
Yeah.
great,
Stud.
love that dude. I asked him, hey coach, here's a situation for you. 4th and 1, game on the line. What's your call? What's your go-to call? He's like 4 verts, baby. And you might think you're gonna throw a shot, and he's like,
Yeah.
no, that's not what it is. My 4 verts is I know exactly. We have answers to everything.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what concept, what coverage you run, and that's like the point of building
Yep.
conceptually strong, systems. Is my stuff works against anything, and that's what we're going to get into today. So this little show that we have today is going to be talking about basically becoming an OC, becoming a coordinator for the first time, and I think. I have not coordinated, and obviously, but Caleb obviously has coordinated at different levels: D3, D1, and AI. And I think no matter how much experience you have or you don't have, you always got it. You're going to have to be a play caller and a coordinator for the first time, and that's what we're going to kind of get into today. So I think to start out here, I want to get your general thoughts. I guess your opening statements. I guess we will say, as far as becoming a coordinator for the first time.
Yeah, it's daunting. I mean, it's like anything, how do you get experience becoming a head coach where you got to become a head coach? How do you get experience playing quarterback where you got to play quarterback? Same thing as being a coordinator. And usually the guys, and I know, you've had conversations with some mutual friends about jobs like, hey, call this guy and talk to him about, this job. But you should dive, you should have confidence to dive head first. I think anybody with, with that competitive spirit is going to think that way, which is a good start. But then when like you sit down and you go, okay, I am the OC, what do I do? And I think it is daunting. And I think you just have to accept that and really start to build your systems brick by brick. It's the same way you build, the same way I build a system to this day, and the same way that you build your organization. And I think you have to be cognizant that things will fail. I think you have to be accepting that things will not be their best on the first draft. And you have to, remain true to yourself, because the amount of resources, what we're doing right now is a resource, right? There's resources. If you look in the right spots, there's resources. That's why I love what you do. That's why I love what you guys do at D1 Rejects. It's a resource that is valuable for coaches. But I think you have to take the resource, apply the resource, but make sure that what comes out is truly you. You can't really fake this thing. And I think that we'll talk about it. I was trying to be cookie cutter, copy and paste of other people's things. And I think that can put you in an odd position when push comes to shove, or when that, those really meaningful moments happen in that first season. So it's understanding that you have to be confident. You do have to have a plan, but you got to know that this plan is not going to be the best plan. You're setting a foundation for hopefully what is coming in the middle of the first year, by the end of the first year, into the second year, and then by the time you're going into year 10 as a coordinator, it's a foundational piece of what you're building.
So then getting into it, I think, and obviously this is a part of what we're going to talk about, but the hardest part, right? Once you get your first coordinator job, I think for you talk about having influences.
Yes.
And there's certainly things that you want to, right? You didn't make all this stuff up, right? You certainly, I think everybody has a philosophy for a reason. And so you getting started, the first day you get to be a coordinator, what are some of the things that that you're thinking about day one, week one, month one? Where does your mind go immediately?
Yeah, I think, like you said, influences I think are critical, and those are going to be the backbone of what you utilize. Like, and to this day, I mean, I'm going into next season will be the 10th year coordinating, and really the ninth iteration of this system, and I still think back to the influences of each of these pieces that have evolved into what our system is. So I think you certainly identify key influences early. I think that is critical. For me, it was air raid, how mummy. I did the certification, wanted to learn. Basically, what we talked about. I wanted to learn a system. Like, how does a system piece together? Like, what are they doing? I was looking at it in the lens of plays back then, which is to our conversation, which can, it'll show itself at some point. But I think identifying the influences is key. I think another thing I would suggest now, knowing where I've gone, is utilizing multiple influences, because to me, I think, like, obviously the air raids, it's a generational system. Like, it's unbelievable what how it was implemented and how it spread. It still exists all over football. But I kind of got stuck to one system, right? And I think the best systems are amalgamations of multiple influences, right? Not too many influences where you don't even know where you got it from, but you start, like, you could, if you put a number on, let's have three core influences that we truly believe in the philosophy and how the game's played. And I think to that is you got to define something that what I'm doing right now in my off season is defining what the offense, for lack of a better term, is supposed to look like. What is it supposed to look like? If somebody turned on the film and watched you, what would you want them to say? And I think that that's where you start to figure out, okay, this is what I want to be. These are my influences. Now let's start this rough draft of what we're going to do. And you got to just start somewhere. Like, you're an artist, and I like to write. And when you sit down to write anything, or you sit down to make a piece of music, or you sit down to write, build an offensive system, you have to start somewhere, right? And I would start with the things that you believe the most. This is the advice I give the young guys. What do you believe in? Like, what is it that you swear by? And don't answer it in a way that's going to make somebody else happy. What do you know you want to exist? And start there. And then let it start to form from that mentality. Because now you're starting from convictions, and not, that might be good. No, convicted thoughts. And maybe you got 3 of them, maybe you got 5 of them, maybe you got 10 of them. Start with your convictions, and then let's start to build on top of it. And that's going to start this rough draft, this first iteration of what you're trying to build.
And so talk about some of those influences. So right away, you get to be, an OC. Obviously, from our past conversations, air raid, like you said, how mummy is kind of those early iterations. But talk about some of these influences. You mentioned the late 2000s Patriots. I
Yep.
said best offense in the history. That's, but then I think building on that, it's like, okay, what's the system you want to run? Okay. But then you mentioned like McVay, the way that they utilize option routes. And then
Yep.
you talk about Lane Kiffin, the way that he is creative. It's almost like that dude. It's all these different artists, like you said.
Yep.
One's is an abstract artist. One is maybe it's pop art, whatever the case is.
Yep.
But then you pull from all these different influences, and so talk about some of those guys and
Yep.
some of those different offenses and some of the things that. And then also talk about maybe the filter, I guess, that you would run that through. It's like, hey, we got to make sure that, it's like who, what, when, where, why. It was always the filter. I always love to think about, like, who are we going to run this with, why, against what. So go through that a little bit for me.
Yeah. So, starting with those convicted thoughts. And so to me, my bridge, and I kind of shared it with you the other day, is we're building the what we would call the 9.0, the operating system 9.0, and the offensive system that we're operating here. And I thought it was really powerful to go back and even my staff, like I had on the big screen of, like, these are the influences. It kind of did what it did when I sent it to you, of like, okay, now that's interesting. Like, where did these frameworks come from? So mine started air raid. That was the core piece. And then, a coach I told you about, I think is the best offensive coach in Cincinnati. Cincinnati plays good football. Evan Dreyer, and the reason for that was his quarterback was coming to play for us, so I got to see him do it, and he became kind of like someone that I could see with my own eyes do it. They're throwing the ball extremely well. They were an empty, and they're the way that they just tempoed teams and had control of teams, and you hear the same knocks on him in his early career. Well, they can't run it. They're not going to play any defense. They can't win in the playoffs. They can't win in all that stuff. And this dude, to this day, I mean, they still win. They win, but he's convicted. And you saw it. You mentioned it. You couldn't help but watch the Patriots in the mid 2000s into the early 2010s, and obviously it's good football. And then when you start kind of watching, it's like, what is it that they're doing? And they were playing with these undersized wide receivers. And then this job I had a bunch of undersized wide receivers, and obviously that one year with Moss, and they did all that you could do, but you start to kind of dig into that, right? And then by around 2017, the McVay thing hit, and I got the book that someone wrote and did all of it, and you're just reading about it. And obviously I like just his aura, like who he was. Like, this is cool. This is a really young guy. This is a guy who played at Miami, Ohio, which is 30 minutes from where I grew up. Okay, there's a lot to it. Then you start studying him. And so basically what I did was I knew stylistically what I was trying to do. And the filter piece that you mentioned is critical. And it happens, to me, the filter on all four of those influences is the critical piece. And when you see like the influences broken down, what they represent is, I like everything that all of those influences do. I like all of their stuff, but you can't run all of anybody's stuff. You can only run all.
Right?
Yeah,
it's not even
just
you.
not. So what I took to me was things that they did really well that I wanted to either improve at, I wanted to integrate, I wanted to make part of what we were doing, and studied those. I tried to understand the full picture of what they're doing. So what did it represent within their particular system? But it was fragments of like really important influences, and really just hunkered down on them doing the best things that they did that I was interested in. And what I think is interesting now, I think most systems are like this. I think Lincoln Riley really demonstrated, because he was off the air raid tree, but when that thing was rolling at Oklahoma, and to this day, they had multiple gap schemes. Their RPO system was great. They had really good play action game. It was not just traditional air raid. And to me, that's when I understood, okay, this is an air raid philosophy with air raid principles, but it's layering different influences. And so to me, there are certain, I try to learn football from everybody that is in this game. I try to learn something from everybody that I meet. And basically what I did was, as I was centering in on what it was I was going for, I went to the source. So, a couple other guys listed, Josh Herring, he runs a really good podcast. I mean, he's a Georgia high school coach, and he has a whole book that he wrote in 20 whatever on option routes. I wanted to know about option routes. I went to the source. It's Josh Herring, coaching in Georgia. I went to Kent State when Sean Lewis was at Kent State, and somehow I was able to be taught the Bryles deep choice system. I went there knowing this is what I'm looking for. And somehow they taught. I was able to learn it from them. And I think through the years, Dub Maddox and Dan Gonzalez and Andrew Coverdale, man, they show up all over the internet sphere of influence on football. But just their systems, the way they teach things, the phrasing, the terminology. I don't necessarily run the same concepts that they do, but the way that they taught football was always interesting to me. You could tell they were hyper intelligent. So to me, I think the piece is starting, what are you convicted by? Okay, let's go to the source. Let's find these things that we are truly engaged by. We're inspired by these other artists. Okay, what is it that we believe we can carry over from what they do? And then understand somebody else's work like it's your own. And that's where once I honed in on Sean McVay and his condensed formations and the option routes and the pass game that they developed from them, then I tried to become an expert in that piece of the system. And now all of a sudden we're going straight to the source for these different, olive branches in the system, and we're truly understanding the ins and out of it. Now we have something that, as we talked about, we are being able to systemize, and it's not a play. It's not a play. It is a concept. It is something that is linear, that is layered, that has answers and options built within it. So I think that I'm really, like, if you pulled up any play, maybe we watch a drive or two of some things I've called. If you asked me, where'd you learn that? I would be able to tell you where I learned it from. And I could pinpoint it to the person, to the experience, to a Twitter article. There are plays that there are designers, because of what you mentioned, those individual plays that I've watched Dan Casey and said, we're going to run the spinner series in the playoff game versus Wheaton and score a touchdown. Freaking Delaware spinner super counter. I literally watched it and I said, that's interesting. That's a designer. And we scored against Wheaton in the playoff game. So there's a lot of different influences, but conceptually within our system, I could tell you exactly where I learned and who I studied to develop that, and then eventually make it my own in the sense of using that influence, using that inspiration, and then understanding it on a level that I could teach back, that I could adjust and make it come to life, if you will.
And that's one of the interesting things is anybody can go on Twitter, and I'm sure you got bookmarks galore on your Twitter. And I think the thing that makes a coordinator truly special, or one that is elite, or even just in the good category, is being able, because everybody, it's a copycat league to a certain degree, but the ones that can be able to use their own verbiage and translate it, and most importantly, like you said, teach it. It doesn't matter what you run unless your guys understand it. And so being able to have these influences, though, and be able to go from the source. So when you have these specific problems for the specific thing, and it's like, I'm sure, one of my favorite things is option routes. And I'm sure that now, like, if you have issues with option routes, I'm sure that, there's a source that you can go to say, hey, I'm having this specific issue with an option route. All right, well, let's pull up, Sean McVay versus, a 4-2-5, and I'm having issues with that.
Yeah.
Right?
So to me, every offseason, so especially what I would call the core value concepts in the system that we believe we're convicted by them. I will study every offseason since 2017. I will study the Rams, and you will see intricacies of how they're running those routes, how they're getting to those routes, maybe some subtle technique adjustments. I mean, one of the best things I ever learned off of was what we used to do at Mount when we didn't necessarily, we watched, like, I wish I could credit them, but I think it was 84 Footwork or Mike Vanucci would put on YouTube, like, just the targets, Cooper Kupp targets, Hunter Renfrow targets. And literally Lane Little and I at Mount St. Joe, we would sit and we just watch it. And the amount of option routes that are in prime Cooper Kupp and Hunter Renfrow, it was all option routes. And we basically taught ourselves how to run the route, what the technique is, how they're protecting the concept, how it reacts versus cover two versus a hard wall inside player versus outside nickel apex versus man-to-man. And every offseason I will go to it. Every offseason I will study RPOs. I will ask the best coordinators that I can get in touch with, what is your philosophy on RPOs? What are the adjustments that you're making? What are defenses doing? Because I believe in those. But if, you talked about it, it's a copycat league. The best artists, steal. They steal and they make it their own. Well, any concept in football, offensive concept, a defense is going to spend time on. So what I'm trying to do is stay ahead of that curve by going to said source. And some sources are literally online. Some sources are direct. But I'm trying to make sure that I have the most up-to-date software is what I'm trying to make sure that we have, is the most up-to-date software without changing the core value. Now, if the core value of the concept needs adjusted, then we are willing to do that. We will change, all the way down to the studs as necessary. But I believe we have that foundation. And now what I'm trying to do is find the layers that continue evolving and essentially make the concept viable for the next season. And I do that with every concept that we have. And the sources are different for every concept because there's no offense out there that there's no offense that runs 100% what we run. It's amalgamation system that has been picked and pulled, and I know where I go to and what I'm going to study. And then when you do that, oh wow, the Vikings are doing that, the Lions are doing that, the Bengals are doing that, the 49ers are doing that. And all of a sudden, okay, your sources kind of grow, but can direct you into different iterations
Right.
of the same idea. And now all of a sudden you have enough material to, you spend enough time on it, you're going to be able to really put some things together.
And I think one of the things you mentioned was Cooper Cup, or,
Yep.
the we'll call them the average whites, the average
Yep.
small receivers.
Yep.
I think one of the issues that some people get themselves into is trying to make every receiver do everything well, and that's just frankly not going to happen, because what Julian Edelman does well is not necessarily what Randy Moss does well, or what Gronk does well, or I just think of like at River Falls right now, like what Austin Rush does well, Blake Rohr can't do well. It's at every level. Like, and you being able to put your guys in the system. And I remember Lincoln Riley talking about this once, that when he is deciding, like, okay, which guy's going to run our over route and why cross, right? He's like, that guy's got to be the savviest. He might not have to be the fastest. He might not have to be the tallest. It's nice to have both of those things, but he's got to be the savviest dude, or a guy that's running a post. Like, what? And again, this is getting super minimal, but like, you got to be able to put your guys. If you're going to run any system, you got to know what, if you're running what River Falls runs, you probably don't want to get the pocket passer type guy. If you're running an air raid system, you probably don't want the runner guy. Like, that's just how it is. And so, you talk about getting advice. I want to talk about some of the best advice, because I think when you're starting out to be a coordinator, I'm assuming you had to pull on a lot of advice early from different sources. Talk about that and some of the best advice you got early in your career.
Yeah, I think, and I remember just being, and it's kind of what guided the principles that I live by now, but I was on just on this quest for knowledge. Like, I wanted, and I was always under the impression that somebody was going to have the magic book to tell you how it's done, right? And it's like becoming a grown up. Like, I have a 4-year-old daughter, and sometimes I'm like, dude, I'm a dad. Like, what? Like, I'm 36 years old. Like, this is insane. And so I was on this quest, and I'll talk to anybody at any level, guys I respect that I just think do a good job. Like, I'm just enamored by guys that can get it done as a coach and have a positive influence on players, and are able to consistently win games. It doesn't matter where they come from. So I would go on recruiting trips to the schools that I had a ton of respect for, the high school head coaches. And I would just ask them, like, what do I need to know? Like, what is it that I need to know? And I remember sitting in the office there's actually I thought it was funny when I moved to St. Paul, you passed New Richmond, Wisconsin. I grew up in New Richmond, Ohio, and it was the weirdest thing. And so I'm in New Richmond, Ohio, on the river, Ohio River. And Pat Burke, who's now the head coach at Dixie Heights in Northern Kentucky, he went through his whole spiel, and like, he ended it with, above all else, if you remember anything that I tell you, you have to be true to yourself. And like, the way that he said it and the emphasis that he put on it, where I had this notebook of just ideas and thoughts, and I want to be like Evan Dreyer, and I want to be like Pat Burke, and I want to be like this coach and like that coach. And he's just, the way he emphatically stated that, what that gave me was confidence that, everybody, you're confident, but everybody has doubts, where it's like, okay, you are in this spot for a reason. Effectively, you are good enough to do this. Like, do what you believe in. And that's was the best thing that I heard, because I was able to, I don't know, just go put all of my energy into, man, do what you believe in. If you're going to go down swinging on your convictions. And some of your convictions you'll learn and adjust as you go. I think you have to be pliable, but that was what gave, because I was really trying to emulate a lot of people. And that's when I kind of understood, like, I'm going to be influenced and I'm going to learn from everybody, but I'm going to be myself. Like, I am going to be who I was meant to be, and what I believe in. And if it's not good enough, I can at least accept that I did it in a way that I was truly convicted with. And I remember that talk, and I still remember that. And today, I've been around now enough where it's like, I, I think it can get taken the wrong way, but the quote that I live by is be unapologetically you. And obviously, if you have like character flaws, like, well, have you got to work on yourself? That's not what I'm saying, but you have to be, unapologetically you, and your vision and your implementation and the phrasing that you use and the energy that you bring. That's just been my kind of calling card where, going through a couple different job changes, it's like, you have to be you. And now when I went to interview like this, like, it was, obviously I'm going to form to the program that I'm working in. Like, that's number one. That's what being, a good assistant coach is. But if you want to hire me, this is what we're doing on offense. And it will always be sound, and it will always be directly geared towards winning. But the way that we do it is the way that I understand how to do it. I can't run somebody else's offense. I tried it. It doesn't work. It's not very good. So that's the best advice I've ever gotten. And that's the best advice. Like, when I know a young guy or a budding coach or someone in the business, like, has it, that's what I tell them. Or if I know, there's guys that are, going through change, you're going through that period in your career where you've got doubt on yourself, whether it was the season results or whatever it is. If I know this person's got it, I'll just tell them, hey, keep being you. Don't change who you are. Get better, study the game, be humble enough to adjust, but don't stop being you, because that's what got you to the point that where you're at.
Love that, man. And I think it's also directly, how do you handle like practice? Because I remember my first year coaching, I felt like I had to yell and scream and do this whole thing, and like, because I'd been around coaches like that, but like,
Yep.
that was them. That's how they approached it. And me, I'm much more of I get hot, but at the same time, I'm equally like, I love joking around. I love giving guys shit, and I love, and so I think above, like you said, above anything else, be who you are. Don't try to be Lane Kiffin. Don't try to be even Nick Saban, even though he's the greatest of all time. But Nick Saban is the best version of himself.
Yep.
And I think you would agree, like, the ones that are unapologetically you are the ones that, like, they're the ones you kind of want to emulate. And so it's like,
Really?
well, might as well just try to emulate the best version of you, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, you got to be authentic. And I think, like, one of the best things that ever happened to me, ended up being my quarterback coach for the entire time I was at Mount St. Joe, and he's an offensive coordinator now in high school in Cincinnati, is I remember I was not the coordinator. It was my first, like, week on the job at Mount St. Joe. I was unpaid assistant. And our OC, wanted me to put a concept on the board or whatever, and I was supposed to do it. And I knew it enough, and I went up there and I did it. And this backup quarterback, Charlie Mullins, asked a question, and I had no clue what the answer was. And I knew I had a moment right there. I'm like, the first thing I thought was, these guys are smart. Like, I've coached low level high school before, and like, you can kind of fool some of that, and that, like, they're still learning the game, and you can fake your way through it. And I made like a conscious decision at that point. Like, I'm not going to act like I know. I'm going to say, I do not know the answer. I will figure that out. And to me, it's into that, where you just have to, and I'm like you, like, when I can on off switch. I can go from drill to drill, and as the drill period wanes down and we've got our work down, like, I can bring guys up and I can say, to talk about a movie or music or comedy, or just say something to lighten the mood. I can do that in the middle of a game. And then the period flips and we're going to team run, and we are 100% focused on this rep. It is a 4th and 1 conference championship mentality right now. And that's just who I am. Whereas I'm like you. I like to joke. I like to, lighten the mood. But when it's go time, like there is no like it's not a funny period. It's like, this is what we're going to do. So, yeah, I think that it's hard when you're young because you're still finding who you are, but everybody has convictions and beliefs that they stand for. And sometimes it takes you a minute to understand what those are. But once you identify those, stand by them, continuously improve. Don't be afraid of adjusting or improving. Or, I think one of the negatives for me, we talked about in the last podcast, is like the passion from me is going to seep out. And I don't even know if seep's the right word. Like, it's coming out like a fire hydrant. And it's like this has been my entire career. It's the number one thing I get credited for, and it's the number one thing I get faulted for. So what I have to do is find how to walk that line to make sure the passion is positive and directed in the right manner, and that it's being used in a beneficial manner, instead of, what it can do is kind of getting on top of guys, and now they feel the weight of the world, and all of a sudden, like, I'm trying to create confidence, all of a sudden, like, my just intensity is squashing the confidence. So that's finding yourself. That's understanding who you are and what you stand for, and always trying to improve. But I know that that's my strength, and that's also a weakness. Okay, how do we balance those two things? And that's part of being yourself and growing and learning, and just finding that voice that you have.
I think one of the things you said there reminded me of maybe it's not a bad piece of advice, but a piece of advice that I think any young coach should be able to take is, say I don't know. It's okay to say I don't know. It's better than trying to give like a half-assed answer, or and there's a line of saying, okay, I'll go figure this out.
Yep.
But like, just saying I don't know, I think that brings a lot of respect, because like, guess what? I don't know. I remember the first time I drew up a defensive front.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Same here. Terrible.
I drew up two eyes and maybe like a wide 9 and like a 3, and I'm like, I remember one of our offensive linemen looked at because I was dropping a coverage, of course, and he's like, "What'd you do? What is that? Like, what's front is that?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's a whatever." And I'm like, I don't fucking know. I don't even know. I didn't even know what an over front was at the time, and hell, I didn't even know where to put guys in linebacker techniques and fits. And I sure knew coverages, but like, I didn't know anything about that. But going into the other side of things, I think that's why a staff is so important in managing that staff. Talk about, because, in your first time being an OC, it is probably the first time you're managing people now. Talk about that experience and some of the things that you're trying to think about early, and what you're doing when you're managing a staff.
Yeah. And I, the article that we're kind of referencing, like, I still, whenever I read it, I go like, this is sage advice. And I think, I came up with this article like 27 years old. And I remember my mentality going in was, we get the guys around me. And I think I had this thought process of like, I'm not going to coach grown men. Like, there are a lot of these guys were older than me, and I don't want to coach grown men. I want them to do their job and do what's expected, and yada, yada, yada. Well, what I found out really quickly is the managing of the staff is one of the more critical and one of the more difficult aspects. And so obviously you're looking to create alignment. Okay. And you're this first year, you don't know a lot of things. Some guys may know more football than you, but you're in this position of leadership. So how do you go about that? And I think, okay, you're trying to create alignment. What I realized really quickly was two things. Number one, you've got to teach everyone in your organization the why. Like, the why is everything. Why are we doing what we're doing? And sometimes what I tell guys now going into year 10, ask me why. And if I do not have an answer, that's an indictment on me and not you. Like, ask why we are doing, and you can ask why about anything. Why do we do a drill this way? Why do we sit this way? Why do we, and a lot of times that's where I've learned the most about myself, or learned the blind spots, when someone asks why and I don't have a rationale. Well, it's not, I saw somebody do it this way. That's why we do it. The second piece that I think is critical is you have to, in that explanation of the why, is you have to continuously express the expectations and what it is you're looking for. Every time I've gotten in trouble as an OC, and it's been in year 1, and it's happened here, I have this vivid vision of what I want going on, and I assume people know after one presentation. Like I remember installing the version here at Georgetown, and I'm like, we got smart guys. These coaches are smart. I did the 2-hour, 2.5 hour, like this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. This is why I believe it. Boom, I just nailed that. Let's roll to the next thing. And I remember like, whoa, like we got to go back to step one. And you have to express what it is your expectations are, not just once, but consistently, because people are not going to be able to read your mind. They're just not. Like, that's an impossible feat. And a lot of times where there are those, you feel like there's these friction points, a lot of times if you go back and understand what it is that the other side is understanding that the expectations are or aren't, you will understand where that gap in knowledge or gap in communication existed. So I think when you're a young guy, and this, I'm telling myself this is going to year 10, over communicate, quit assuming that every time I got in trouble in this year, I was assuming people understood in the fabric of their soul how to run a choice route. They don't know how to run a choice route. It's not because they're stupid. They haven't done it before. They don't watch the choice route for 100 hours. They don't do it. That's not what they do. That to me as a young coach, and a lot of times, like I wasn't confident enough to correct people, right? And I think that if you are authentic and you're creating those relationships and you are doing it from a point of conviction, this is what we believe, that's where the corrections can come in. You don't need to, I never liked working with someone that was always picking holes in everything you did. Like I want to give my staff freedom, but when I want something specific, just tell them. And these guys, like good assistants, are going to do what you ask them to do. Like that's what they're going to, and they're going to try their best at it. And then, okay, they do it, and then let's keep getting better. But you got to quit assuming. You got to express expectations. You got to fight for your culture every single day. Your culture is not just the interactions. Your culture is the communication piece, like what we're running on offense. How deep do people understand? How focused are the ideas that we're practicing every single day? When we throw the 4-step speed out, it can become monotonous. The 4-step speed out is everything in what we do. And every single time that we run that, I want it to be, expressed in a manner like it is the most important down and rep of the day. And, I call it layup lines. Okay. And layup lines, like the whole idea to me in layup line, I was an average high school basketball player. When you do this to start everything, because you got to see the ball go in the net, and you're creating a rhythm about the day, about what you're about to go do. Those type of things, I would never have expressed it in that detail, but I understand what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're going to do it, the expectation of what we're going to do, and I want it replicated every single day like that. And now I understand that, and I can express it. But when you're expecting people to read your mind, it's going to leave a lot of gaps in knowledge, and it's always going to come back in usually the most inopportune moments in a season, and that's usually on the leader and their lack of communication.
I remember my first day at River Falls. The first drill we did is like an RPO drill. One guy throws a bubble, one guy throws the now screen, one guy throws the 5-step glance, one guy throws the speed out. And I guarantee you, it's 4:54 on a Thursday, and I guarantee you the first thing, and maybe not Thursday, it's walkthrough day, but I guarantee you, still in the playoffs, the first thing they did on Wednesday, on December 10th, was that RPO drill. And they do it every day. And they communicate, you have to do this like a game. You have to do this like it's the quarterfinals, and you have to do it like it's the first day. Like you do it like that every day. And I just kind of piggybacking on something you said earlier, I think I gained the most respect for coaches after my first install that I did as a coach. Because I remember after that install, I was like, those guys have no idea what I just said. And I remember, and then Coach Walker let me install with some of the young guys, and he comes in and he's like, so what did you guys learn? And I thought those poor like 17-year-old kids were like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what he said. And so I'm like, I got some work to do. And so I think like that over communicating thing is so important. And, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, but then it's the next level of this thing is practice.
Yeah.
how do we practice? And one of the things I know you like to emphasize on is being fast, being physical, and also having fun. Talk about how you approach practice, as well as some of the things that are some of your non-negotiables as far as what you want to get done.
Yeah, I think that was a sticking point. I give a lot of credit to already referenced ones, but Evan Dreyer, watching his offensive operations to this day, like you said, like they just finished their the playoffs in Ohio, but I guarantee going in the state championship game, they started with Pat and Go, they started with Team on Air, like they do the same things and they do it at such a great rate. But so you mentioned the adjectives. I think understanding what you're trying to accomplish, what is the offense, and now how do we take what we see in our head, all right, and what this completed vision is, and how do we actually build that in a practice? And I think having an education background, understanding it's part to whole, and then deconstructing it whole apart. What drills actually carry over? One of the things that I believe I think it just kind of came upon me, is I believe in practical application and drills. When you watch me do quarterback indie, there's nothing that you see on Instagram. Nothing. It is footwork, it is rhythm, it is reset in the pocket, and it's throwing on time and on place. I believe I teach quarterbacks more in RVAs or RVA read or skell or half line or team, whatever it is, because we're playing quarterback and we're doing those type of things. So to me, it's understanding what the final picture is. How do we segment these drills that build to the ultimate, the ultimate picture that you're trying to paint? And then, it's funny you said, like, that's the drill. Like, okay, like our kids would say the same thing, even at Georgetown, one iteration through. Like, there's going to be the same drills, and I would always echo to them, these young guys, as long as you play for me, this will be a drill, and this is what we are doing. This is why we are doing it. This is how it plays out in a game, and this is the intensity and the focus and the intentionality that we need to have in this drill, because it is going to present itself. We're going to do this drill so many times, and it might play out once for you individually in a game, but we are either going to catch the ball or we are not going to catch the ball, and that could be a play that decides a game, that decides a season. We don't know. So I think it's understanding what picture you're trying to paint, and then what drills you're doing to build. And I think drills for the sake of drills, like I used to have a drill book when I was a quarterbacks coach. I had every drill in the play. I had them all. I had them all, bro. Like I had every single drill that I ever saw, and they were good drills. They were sweet. I don't know why we were doing half.
Yeah, sure, look cool.
They definitely look cool. If we filmed them, it would have been money. I could have sold, back in the day when they sold DVDs, I could have sold DVDs on it. But were they translating to anything in game? And that's where I think you have to understand, like, practicality of drills, practicality of these reps. How do we get them to translate? And then making sure that you set expectations for each said drill prior to going on the field. You echo it on the field, but this is the first time they're hearing what their tempo is or how we're going to execute it. It's going to be horrible, right? It's going to be horrible. So making sure you hear the Saban deal back when he's at Alabama, he's talking stuff like these drills need to be installed beforehand. Maybe you have a practice that emulates your first practice that you're setting up the drills. That works too, because it's not the actual deal. But I think it's just understanding what you're trying to accomplish, what the expectations are, what the tempo and the focus and the intent is within drill to drill, period to period, and then just making sure that you're constantly echoing and communicating and providing the constructive criticism to get those to look like what you need to look like. And then once you get them to look like what you need to look like, you can't stop coaching it. That's the biggest. It's one of the biggest misnomers. I do it every time. I get so confident that we got this. We got it, and we're so good at it. But the repetition is what's going to drive this. And I think once you capture a certain skill set, now the intention is not, okay, go to a new skill. No, let's double down on this skill. Let's take the skill from good to great. Okay, you finally get a group that gets to, oh man, we're great at this. Take it from great to elite, and then once elite, you're maintaining the standard every single day. And if it drops to suboptimal, we are in a healthy manner. We are calling it out. We are directing our attention to it. We are expressing that this is not acceptable to the standard that we're operating at, and you maintain trying to push the envelope to be at that highest level. So that's a lot of words, but what are you trying to be? What drills lead to those results? express the standards, hold the standards, don't stop coaching the fundamentals.
I think the only quarterback drill or the indie that we did when I was at Riv was like crossbar challenge at the end of practice. We just didn't. I couldn't believe how we just didn't do like quarterback indie. There was no like, all right, quarterbacks go over it. Like the only like indie we did by ourselves was when it was a specialist period.
Yeah,
and we just took snaps from centers. That's all.
Yeah.
Like that, and we focused on taking the same footwork over, and then the drills that we did was full speed 11-on-11 football. Like that's what we did. Like that was our drill. Like, and that's the best. I think. I mean, that's how, if I got back into it, that's what I would do. Like
and I think okay, and okay, if you have a moment where you can't be like the type of drills I like are cross positional. I like run mesh. I like run mesh with the RPO action to it. I like doing routes versus air with a read. I like working different concepts in those deals. I like doing our option route drill, quarterback in pass catcher. I like doing blitz pickup with whoever your internal pieces in the O line and the quarterback, like cross positional drills that are parts of the whole that simulate real football. Like that's what I like.
What do you do, or what are you trying to do? And do the drills that are based on that. Don't do the drills that you see on Twitter just because it looks cool and you think having fast feet. That's why I love run mesh, especially as an RP as a read option team, like or a guy that did a lot of read options. I would rather see like run mesh a million times and just get used to seeing, okay, how's this defensive lineman moving? How do I see his head versus if he's surfing versus like that? That'll take. And then what's the defense doing? When they get red, what are they doing? Are they surfing? Are they hard chase? Are they whatever the case is? I think you can get really distracted with some of the stuff you see online versus just doing what's right. And I think that leads us into kind of this last piece here is what every coordinator needs, right? But regardless of being a position coach, what do you think if you're going to have a successful offensive unit or a defensive unit for that matter? Right. What are the things that first come to mind when you are thinking about what every coordinator needs?
Yeah, the first thing I think of is that who's in charge, the head coach, like who is operating. The best thing that ever happened to me was I became the interim OC because our head coach was the interim head coach, and we were 26 or 27. I'd never called a varsity play in my life. He had never been a head coach a minute in his life besides when he and I would take the JV team at Mount St. Joe on the road on a Wednesday night or whatever. And now we're in charge. And effectively, he gave me the confidence and the freedom, knowing that I always say with freedom comes responsibility, right? He was a first-time head coach, and he had all these responsibilities that he had to handle. He said, take the offense and go. Like the name of the game is win. And so, obviously in critical situations or dependent on whether we're going to take the ball, we're going to defer, like obviously the head coach is always going to have influence on that. But what Tyler Hopperton did, who's the head coach of Mount St. Joe, is one of the best, young head coaches with 10 years of experience in Division III in any level, is he trusted his guys. He set the expectations. He set the temperature of the culture. He provided feedback. But the amount of times that I saw him come into the office when we're game planning and say anything unless it was like he had to get it off his chest or a tight end with special teams, which was what he was running, or, what is minimal. And I never had to ask for permission. I never had to do any of those type of things. I think what that does is they give you the trust. That's the same thing I got here at Georgetown. It's like, obviously Coach Perrin, he's running the defense, he's running the program. The name of the game isn't to have just a 50-point per game offense, it's to win the game, right? But when we hit our rut this year, and the ruts are going to come no matter how good you are, when we hit our rut at Georgetown, it was not, we have to change this on offense and we have to change that. He said, go back to the fundamentals and keep coaching. Build confidence, keep coaching. He would always say, coach our players through the situations that they're experiencing. I thought it was one of the greatest coaching phrases I've heard where, well, our guys don't know how to do this and they don't know how to coach them through it. They don't know, teach them, right? They don't know, teach them. My dad was an old ball coach and he's crushed it. I won't use the exact phrase on there, but I was complaining about something after we dropped one and we played horrible on offense. And he was on the phone. He said, "You're a coach, freaking coach him." And he said it in Southwest Ohio, like he had it all in there. Freaking coach him, man. Like, what? You're the coach. And so that is the support that you need. Is the head coach is going to have the influence that they desire to have. That's their responsibility, right? So this year Coach Perrin and I were really good on, this is how the opposing offense is going to play. They're going to limit possessions. They're a high scoring output. We want to kind of control the ball. We understood how complementary football worked. But the best things that we did was we doubled down on the fundamentals. We doubled down on ourselves. We held ourselves accountable to the teaching. We didn't change mid-year, which I've been a part of, which is not going to solve any problems. It's going to create more problems and different problems. We stuck true to what we believed in. And when we stunk it up at Georgetown, you don't lose, and you certainly don't score one touchdown and get blown out on the road. It was, I believe in you. You're smart, you're experienced, you understand what you're doing. Just go back to essentially not the drawing board, but go back to the fundamentals and teach your guys through how to take that next step. Right. And that to me is like, it's critical. And I think when I advise people that are going to interview for these coordinator jobs, is you've got to understand the head coach's intentions and the head coach is trying to do the best that they can possibly do. But there are different styles of head coaches that are going to influence the offense in a manner that can strip it of what it is. And now all of a sudden you're calling a different offense that you're not comfortable with. And I think that you just have to be very aware of that. You have to understand who you're working for, how do they influence your side of the ball in the course of a game week, in the course of game planning, in the course of a game when you do struggle. Like, what's coming after the struggle? Is it, got to change it? I want to get rid of this play. Like I was told in a situation, like, we have to get rid of the RPOs. And so, okay, what? Like, that's a core fundamental of my belief in football. Like, I understand, I know the pros and the cons of it, but we're going to take that away. Okay, so now you're calling plays with a hand behind your back. And whether you like RPOs or not, that's not the point. Like, if someone was telling me, like, you can't get an empty, okay, don't hire me. Like, that's not me. I like everything, but that's not who I am. Like, we're using this as a tool, right? This is part of the whole picture. So I just think it's that support from the top and the belief and letting you fail, right? Like, Coach Hop didn't want me to fail. He didn't want us to lose. But the only way I learned was failing, just failing over and over, and then trying to get better and learn from it and improve the product from week to week, from season to season, and over the course of my career. And that's how I believe this system became as authentic as it is I just kept working on us over and over and over with minimal restrictions.
You ultimately are who you work for, is really what it comes down to.
Is what it is.
There is if you and again, like, that's why I do this show, is talk to really smart people like yourself. And don't just take a coordinator job just to take a coordinator job.
Do not do that.
Take a job because you can either learn from the head coach, who's an offensive guy, right?
Correct.
Or the head coach is going to give you the opportunity to run your thing and be you. Because if you go somewhere and just wants you to run his stuff or run what other people are running, that's a good way to not be a coordinator anymore.
Yeah, you're going to fail, and the program's going to fail. You're going to fail, and obviously you can rebound from failure. But I mean, what you just said is probably the most important piece of, like, okay, we're trying to use this as a, our whole idea was like, let's educate. This is a platform for education, and I just use experience, and I think any job, don't chase titles. I think I'm inspired and by levels too. Like, I want to call it on to Big Ten Network and all that stuff, but you got to be in a environment that's going to foster what you believe in. I'll tell you this. Here's the inside track on when I knew Coach Perrin was taking this job here. I had 3 things that I wanted to know. Number 1, can my daughter be involved in the football program? Can she come into my office? Obviously, not distract, but like, can she come into the office? I experienced where that wasn't a thing. Number 2, whose offense are we running? Right. And number 3, how are we verbalizing this said offense that we are calling? Like, is it someone else's terms? Is it carryover terms? Is it the terms that I believe in? Right. And obviously those things checked, and we saw the game very similarly, and we both had the same intentions, which was, to win, to develop people and to win. Like, we had the same intentions, and I felt better about that. And if I would have gotten no to that, I would have been okay with that. Early in my career, I can't say that's true. I would have chased the job and said in interviews what I thought other people wanted to hear. That's the best way to, when you show up on day 1 of the job, to have basically fooled yourself and the other person. And now all of a sudden you have this conflicting ideology that I'm going to do all the chat GPT answers to these interview questions and make sure I get the job. Like, yeah, getting the job's important, but if you get a job that does not allow you to do what you are trained and good at, or aspiring to be good at, it's not going to matter anyways. It doesn't matter what the title is, what the pay is.
You're interviewing him too, just as much as he's interviewing you.
Yeah, 100%. And you have to be okay with saying no. And I was not, or I was like, just next level up. I'm going, if this is any NAI job in year 3 at Mount St. Joe, any D2 job, I'm taking it. It doesn't matter. Right. But obviously things worked out in a manner that stayed the course at Mount St. Joe, and learned a lot, and was able to grow into myself as a coach. Use last year's stop as an education piece to what a different level of ball looked like, a different region of the country. Met great people like yourself and Joe. Okay, now I'm going to try to use that to create positive momentum, and maybe not the best fit or situation. And then, okay, let's learn from those. Let's get in a situation where we see the game, and we have similar goals, and are on the same page with just how this operation is going to work.
Man, it's good stuff, man. Appreciate you.
Yep. Great time.
What's next week look like for you?
Next week, we go Friday, Saturday. We're hitting the on-campus visits hard, hot. The top guys that we're looking at. Next week, we got another round, if you will, of some of the transfer guys, some of the guys that play basketball, and the Friday, Saturdays don't work from a high school vantage point, and kind of just trying to get all the ducks in a row. Where I was telling somebody about this today. I think another good thing to really look at is there is no, if you want to be elite at something, there's not really a balance. But like, we work really hard here. I'm proud of the way that we work. We don't stay in the office till 8 just to say we stay. If we need to stay till 8, we stay till 8. But we're going to work really hard through next week, and then we're going to get those 2 weeks, right? And you get the bowl games, and there'll be football, and it'll be impossible for me not to look at some North Texas and do some stuff, right? So we're going to work through it. And then one other interaction I had that I thought was funny, and you'll like this one, is a guy I really like, and is, hey, you in the no football mode coming out of the season, or where are you at? And I just had to fire it back. I said, I'm always in football mode, baby. Like, it's, I don't know, probably not healthy, but that's just how it rolls.
That's what the elite do, man. That's what the elite do.
Amen.
They don't stop. Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you, man.